Forms highlighting City Council races in Wards 2, 4, and 5. Ward 2 features incumbent Jennie Donahue and her opponent Stephanie Niketic. Ward 4 comes down to a choice between Nancy Caswell and Harman, who are looking to succeed Councilor Christine Wallace in January. In Ward 5, which is in front of me right now, has incumbent Jim McCauley squaring off against Owen Smith. To ensure everyone can make it tonight, Ward 5 candidates will go first, followed by Ward 4, and lastly Ward 2. Each form will be roughly 40 minutes. Respondents will have 90 seconds to answer questions posed by me, with the other candidate getting 60 seconds to respond if they so choose. I will ask follow-up questions to keep conversations going should I deem the topic worthy of further discussion. The candidates will be able to ask their counterparts at least one question and with the same time parameters. So in an effort to squeeze in as many questions out of them, there are no opening and closing statements. Also, to save time, I ask all folks of you to hold your applause during the forums, except when I announce the names of the candidates. And lastly, the goal of these forums is to give Newburyport voters more information before going to the polls on the November 7th municipal election. So with that, I will say welcome Jim McCauley and Owen Smith.
Thank you.
This is a question for both of you. Do you support moving Newburyport Youth Services to 59 Low Street? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to comment about that?
Yeah, I've been commenting for 2 years on it. I think it's a pathway. It's a complicated pathway to get there. The site has some complications to it, but they're all being worked through. I think part of the frustration that people have is that we're not moving faster. And right now, I know that the administration is hard at work crafting a plan, but I, as the counselor, I haven't seen that plan. I haven't seen any indication of that plan. And in the scheme of things, there's 11 people in the city who are going to vote on this. And I think that a more collaborative process would help this move forward. We, the council, have to be proactive in asking the administration that we can help them, and the administration needs to let us help them going forward. So I have been more a critic of the process than the location. Thank you.
Owen?
So we kind of need to consider how we got here today. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts surplus that property about at the end of the previous administration's term, and part of that was the city council needed to vote to acquire the property. My opponent did not vote in favor of that. So there is some voting history here on not showing support toward the location. Additionally, there needs to be a design which $200,000 was allocated to. My opponent again voted against that. So if you support 59 Low Street, we have to do the due diligence, which is finance a design so we can get a plan ahead. The administration is working diligently on that. I've seen conceptual drawings there of a facility that's actually going to meet the needs of the community. So I support that location because it's near the schools. It's convenient to residents of Ward 5 and the families there. And I think an encompassing plan that would address the traffic safety and pedestrian safety needs there, along with the facility, are where we need to be. Thank you.
So, where's NYS now? And what do they do in the meantime? Who wants to tackle that first?
So right now, right now NYS uses a hodgepodge of facilities. They have an outdoor tent space at the middle school, and they are subject to having events canceled due to weather or other events out of our control. And they don't have a safe and adequate place to work. They had the Brick Brown School about 4 years ago, and then it was deemed unsafe due to mold, poor HVAC system, and also the fact that it's not suitable for a modern, safe facility for our youth. It needs help with ADA accessibility, and it needs to be upgraded. So the easiest solution is to find a central location to our community and build a facility there that meets our modern standards. And that would include having a gym at 59 Mill Street. Thank you.
Yeah, so First of all, I want to go back and say, yeah, I didn't vote for acquisition of this property in the last administration because I asked a simple question, is what we were going to do with the property. And I wanted it to go to the Parks Department in the interim while we worked on this. And the previous mayor said no. And so we were just going to buy the property and leave it empty. And I thought that was a mistake, so I voted no. But when it did come up with this new administration, I did vote yes. It was a unanimous vote, and they assigned it to the Parks Department so that they could get their feet underneath them going forward. I am a critic of the process. NYS has been homeless for 2 years. There hasn't been a plan B. There was money allocated for the Brown School, $700,000. It would have cost $100,000 to fix the heating system. It would have cost $200,000 to remediation. It would have cost another $100,000 to make it ADA compliant. It wasn't a final spot. It was an interim spot. And for short money, under $600,000, NYS could have had a gym space in the Brown School, and they could not be subject to weather instances and the things that are going on right now. So we as a council, we've decided that we're rolling the dice, and we're taking all or nothing approach with one building without a plan B, and that leaves the kids and the NYS program homeless until this is built. Thank you.
Well, let's go back. Let's continue with the Brown School. We'll go to the Brown School now. So, here's my question. Oh, here it is. Owen, do you support keeping and renovating Brown School gym and playground as recreational spaces for Newburyport residents and kids?
So the Brown School is a facility that is in a state of disrepair. And we have a few needs in this community. One is affordable housing for our seniors, and another is a safe center for our youth. So we have a solution here, which is the 59 Low Street property being properly built to meet that need. The Brown School, if we're going to add an interim gym, is going to add undue cost and delay to address a more immediate need, which is our housing crisis. So I think what we need to do is review the information that we got from the RFIs a couple weeks ago and determine what the developers are telling us is we need to get the most return for our investment. And that would be to build sufficient units there to address our housing needs and leave the gym topic for later. I think the gym, we'll have a new gym at 59 Willow Street, and we need to address the housing needs first at the Brown School. Thanks.
Yeah, so the Brown School is a city asset, and it is in a densely populated neighborhood, and there is current zoning on it for senior affordable housing. And yes, we got some RFIs, but they're non-binding RFIs. They're ideas of what could and could not go in there. Many people did not choose to respond because there's an effort to bid on this. The Brown School gym isn't just an extra gym. It's a community space. We've heard time and time again from others, from the theater group, they need rehearsal space, from the youth basketball, that they need indoor space so the kids don't have to practice at 9:30 at the high school and can get decent practice time. We've heard from the adult leagues that they need somewhere from an indoor space, maybe pickleball or some other sport like that can be brought in-house. This is a community center outside, over and above the needs for an NYS gym. The NYS gym has its own prerogatives. They have their own priorities that have to happen within that itself. One gym isn't going to solve our problem going forward. In terms of taking action, I have filed legislation that's been sitting in committee since March of this year, which would break off the Brown School gym and fund it, and to break off the other part and fund it for affordable housing. So both of those things have, I wrote the legislation, it's sitting in committee, and no one's done it.
Okay. So with the Brown School and 59 Willow Street, I mean, there seems to be a lot of projects that are just kind of stuck in the quagmire. And it seems like there are different approaches to that. Jim, do you want to talk about that a little bit, about your approach?
Sure. My approach is collaborative. In my professional life, I run a $200 million business that builds infrastructure in North and South America. I need to be collaborative. I need to have subcontractors. I need to have plans. I need to have engineering designs, all of those things. No one does that in a vacuum. And so sometimes what we see, I was criticized, for example, the Department of Law about trying to hold it up. But the reality is that the plan came in July, but it didn't have approval from the Concom yet. It didn't have approval from the planning board yet. We would look, and then on top of that, it didn't get any bids, any contractors who actually bid on it. We would look foolish if we approved the plan that had to change because of the items mentioned by the Concom or the additions made by the planning board, and the fact that nobody bid on it, and yet we would approve that. I think that the administration does a lot of great work in building these plans. I just wish that they would incorporate some of the city council, chair of public safety, chair of community services, chair of budget and finance, to be able to help them build a program that can mutually move forward faster.
Now, Owen, what do you think? Is it the way he's doing it?
So I think the city councilors do need to realize that they are a pipeline to represent the interest and the needs of their wards and their constituents. And part of that is to articulate the need to the administration, but allow them to use the subject matter experts that they have and the consultants they have to make these technical decisions. The Bartlett Mall issue, which was brought up, is a perfect example of this. The city retained a professional engineer, and there's a signed and sealed drawing, which is done after all due diligence is completed. And that should mean something, because a professional engineer is putting his career on the line when he signs and seals a document. Part of the reason I believe why we didn't have any respondent bids is no reasonable contractor is going to put a good faith bid in if there's uncertainty in the project. And the uncertainty was the fact that the city council didn't approve it when bids went on the street. So part of this would be to develop a project through a pipeline, have it go from concept, scoping, and that's where the city councilors can provide input. And then when the design decisions are made, the administration will work on that and come up with a package plan. And at that point, when all the due diligence is complete, we put it on the street with the funding approved. We can't make funding determinations until all that is done. So I think part of the way is to follow normal procedures that work elsewhere in government and allow the professionals to make the decisions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to respond.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so
A minute, okay? Just a minute.
yeah, I get it. So it was signed by an engineer, which was great. However, when we asked for references, they were zero. We said, what was the references that you had replicated something like this? And the answer was, there were no references. So this was an experiment. This was an experiment with tax money. And so you know what? We do need to be extra cautious about this. And yeah, I would agree that the contractors who bid on this were uncertain. They were uncertain that it was actually going to work. Why? Because we asked them to stand. We asked them to back it up. We asked them to have an extended warranty and do the maintenance on this going forward. So I think that was a case of good due diligence from the council's standpoint. I think we'll get a better plan in the spring, and I think that we'll be able to move it forward as fast as possible.
Your last word for a minute, Owen.
So part of the engineering profession is we have to take ideas and put them together to try new things. You know, we built the Hoover Dam. That was never done before, but we use science and facts and data to build something better. So some of the concepts of the Bartlett Mall, general stormwater remediation and site remediation projects, and it's being applied in a historical park. The professional engineer understood the science behind it and the due diligence and realized that this could work. And a contractor is going to bid on the project, whether the design works or not, because it's not on the contract. That liability falls on the designer, which would be the professional engineer. So I think the uncertainty was caused more by the fact that the city council had this pending approval. And again, no contractor is going to put the time and effort in to put a good faith bid if they don't think they're going to get a return on their investment. Thank you.
So I have one more question for you, Jim. Do you think there's, I mean, is it ever happened that a city councilor just drags their feet as a tactic? Does that happen?
Yeah, it does happen.
On purpose, just to keep things muddled in the mire?
It's happened right now with the Brown School legislation I just talked about. It's not being addressed. Why? You know, we had a city councilor admit on the floor that He was blocking legislation on the Brown School because he wanted a decision on 59 Low Street first. So it does happen. It happens every day. And that's their prerogative. But when you have a committee that gets together, and the committee, is a subgroup that goes through this, and they all agree that it's, what is there isn't quite there. It's checks and balances in the committee too. We get votes 2-1, 1-2, to move it out, to ask more questions, things like that. This isn't one council that can do it. It's, they would have to reach out and get a coalition of people to drag their feet.
So would you employ that tactic? Now that you hear that it happens, would you employ that tactic to keep something going or in committee?
No, I believe that as city councilors, we have a duty to represent the public interest. And that is also to respect and understand the will of the people. The people want to see progress in the city. And part of that means deferring to the professionals, making sure the professionals are doing their job, and then working pragmatically with the administration to get these things through. It's already been determined that the long-term plan for 59 Low Street was established in the previous administration. The current administration supports it wholeheartedly. It's not productive to be delaying this project because if we delay it 1 year, we're going to be adding more and more cost to it. We can look at the firehouse as an example of that. That was a project for 15 years plus. It was necessary to have a safe and healthy place for our firefighters to work. And because of the delay, we went from what was about a $5 million project to a $10 million project. And part of that was because of the high inflation we had post-COVID. And this is why we need to be moving in a steady, consistent manner, because when we cause delay because of disagreement, when the greater goal is to get this accomplished for our community, we end up paying more in the long run. Thank you.
All right, so Owen, I'm going to give you a chance to ask your opponent a question.
Okay. The question I came up with is kind of like what we're talking about.
Sure.
But I am having a difficult time understanding how it is fiscally responsible to be spending nearly $2 million for a gym at the Brown School when such discussion will cause further delay and, increase of cost to the youth center.
Yeah, so the $2 million is not an accurate number. It's a number that was floated by the architect to do some certain things. We've asked the administration to get contractor bids. We think that with a contractor bid, the number could be $400,000 or $500,000, which we think we could fit into our tax structure without raising taxes today. We think that could be turned up in 6 months or so. The location at 59 Low is probably 2 years away, 3 years away, even if everything was approved tomorrow. And that's because of permitting and final designs and all of those things. So I'll answer your question. I think it's fiscally responsible to spend $500,000 or $600,000 to activate the gym. I think it's fiscally responsible to help the kids get a place to play right away within the 6 or 8 months time frame. I don't think it's fiscally responsible. I don't think it would be a delay of any sorts of holding up 59 Low Street for activating the Brown School gym. I think they're two mutually exclusive conversations.
Go ahead.
So one additional follow-up is, how is that fiscally responsible with the demonstrated need for affordable senior housing if we're going to be holding up the Brown School with that?
That's a different question altogether, right?
It's a thought here about the bigger picture. We talked about how these two issues are tangled up together, and we need to unravel them and go step by step in each direction. So if we keep muddying these two distinct areas, we're going to end up paying more for both sides of it.
Well, you don't want to muddy issues. There are two different situations there. The Brown School is already zoned and ready to go for housing. We made a decision in 2017 and we backed out on it. There are plans for that. We can move forward with that tomorrow, collectively tomorrow. The Brown School gym is separate from the school. It's separate. There's a separate wall, a separate entrance. We could easily move on two different things at the same time. With the amount of work that has to do for senior housing, In that facility, the amount of permitting and design, et cetera, that would happen is a 2-year project, with construction taking 12 to 18 months after that. The gym could be in progress already. There's other things with the site at the Brown School. There's the park that's there, that's an Article 97 issue. That would need an act of the legislature to undo that. So it isn't quite as easy as, hey, you should all be senior affordable housing, and that's what we're going to do, and that's it. I think we can do multiple things, and I think that we owe it to everyone to have an honest debate about that.
All right, let's move on. Actually, it's your turn to ask Owen a question. You go for it.
A lot of your literature says that you were on the Water and Sewer Committee and that you work collaboratively, but you weren't reappointed to the Water and Sewer Commission. You were actually replaced. And the reason was that after a meeting, which I was present for, the Water and Sewer Commission voted down a proposal that you had, which happens occasionally, but the actions afterwards, I think, are illustrative here in the work of collaboration. Because instead of what you did...
Is there a question? Or?
Yeah, there is. I have to set the context for it.
Well, let's go for it.
I will. Sorry. So you did write a letter to the City Council, and in the City Council you criticized the Water and Sewer Commission, you criticized the mayor and the mayor's decision, and then you criticized the City Council itself and the statutory right to set rates. And so as part of that, the question that I have is, if elected and you need to work collaboratively, what behavioral types of changes will you make to be able to work with councilors, 10 of which will never agree with you, to be able to work collaboratively going forward?
Go for it.
Okay, so I think what you're asking about is the rate setting in June of 2022, and that's not exactly what happened. The commission actually voted unanimously in recommending a water rate that would not use retained earnings to subsidize the rate. What happened was later it was changed by the administration because, and they, I think, inadvertently decided to use $100,000 more than what was ever discussed on the table. So my concern was the precedent of using these subsidized rates to, or subsidizing our rates with the retained earnings and addressing our issue to be liquid when it comes to the upcoming capital needs. So I did work collaboratively with the board. We came up with a resolution that we thought was reasonable, and we approved it unanimously. I then exercised my rights as any individual would have to exercise their First Amendment rights and go before the City Council to explain my position, which I think I did quite well. And at the end, it was the decision of the City Council that approved it, and I respected that. So I really don't understand how that was not working collaboratively. That was basically representing the interest of the water ratepayers and also the voice that the board of the Water and Sewer Commissioners has to make these types of decisions in the public interest. Thank you.
So, Jim, I have a question for you. And I'm sorry to go back to the mechanics of the City Council, but, I mean, have you ever voted for something that you personally disagreed with, but because it was the right thing for your constituents, what they wanted? Can you give me an example of that you voted against what you believed in to benefit your constituents?
I have. It's tough to give an example of that. I think that most of it has to do with some of the financing we do. I think that many of my constituents are concerned about rising tax rates along the way. But there are some things like, for example, the interim budget we just passed. We could have pushed back on that pretty hard. But it's the right thing to do. We have staff that needs, and we have needs that have to happen. There's nothing like marijuana, for example, that I voted for the constituency and I have a personal feeling for it one way or the other. It's nothing like that. Most of those issues were financial in nature, where I wanted to save money versus the needs of the city.
Is there any response to that, or is that a good answer?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I mean, that's basically City Council's role is to make sure that the public interest is represented first more than your personal interest or your personal feeling towards things.
Could you do that? Could you vote for something that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have to be objective in my day job, and I have to look at the facts and the circumstances around things, and sometimes I have to do things that I'm not comfortable with. But at the end of the day, I realize it's because it's for the right reasons. So yes.
So Jim, does that happen in the city council? Do you know of any councilor who does that? Says, I don't really like this, but I'm voting for the will of my constituents. Can you give me an example of anyone doing that? In your tenure here?
Yeah, I think it happens. I think it happens probably 2 or 3 times a year. That there might be a misalignment between somebody's personal beliefs and their constituents' feelings on that stuff. I can tell you, like, for example, with 59 Low Street as an example, the majority of the people in my ward are for a permanent home for NYS. When they talk about the numbers, what it could be, no one's seen those numbers, but what it could be, then people get a little squirrely, and it's not an 80-20. Sometimes it's 50-50, and if the numbers get high enough, it's 40-60 the other way, because everyone is concerned about the rising taxes that are here. Taxes make the city unaffordable. Our tax rate and the spending that we have directly impacts how people live here and the quality of life here.
Any response to that?
Yeah, I think it's important too to consider the increasing tax rate, and part of that is how efficiently we spend our money in this city. And part of that is also, like we've been talking about extensively tonight, making sure that these projects are addressed in a timely manner with the requisite professionals making these decisions. So I would like to see the city have adequate resources to make sure we're spending our money effectively, and secondly, so we could be competitive to get outside funding for many of these necessary projects. Right now, I see a planning department that's overwhelmed, and I see a DPS that doesn't even have a traffic engineer. And now we're facing all kinds of major issues in the city that go down to public safety with our needs, and we need to have the right people in the right place. And I think the city council has a responsibility to make sure those investments are made.
So I should know this, but what ward is C&J lot in? What ward is it? 6. So I'm hearing there's some rumblings about we're looking into turning that into affordable housing as a possibility. Is that a feasible project? I mean, who wants to take that first?
So there are issues with that. That's MassDOT property. It's part of a park and ride. So obviously to obtain the property, it would take a heavy lift with an outside entity to get it. And then depending on the funding sources for that, that could be highway trust fund property, which can make it even messier. I know the city council just recently accepted a planning study to look at the Market Basket and Shaw shopping centers. And that is private property there, which we might have a better job getting the affordable housing and housing stock in general place there with the proper convincing investments made. So I am eager to see that planning study there, but I think that's a more immediate feasible option. I can see a reluctance from MassDOT to give up the park and ride property because of the need for transit-oriented development and the potential that we could actually have a bus depot there again or future facilities to meet our transportation needs. Thank you.
Yeah, so I sponsored the legislation to accept the donation to the zoning and the grant acceptance to look at that. And C&J bus lot is included in that area as well. We'll have a consultant to be able to do that. I know Senator Tarr's office has already reached out to the state and had some activity and actions to try to evaluate that property for what it could and couldn't have there. It is restricted with transit-based, but we can work around that and we can work some things. I don't think it's going to be a city project. It would probably be a state project because the state owns the land right now. It's a state entity, but we could help them as much as we could with zoning and things like that. So if it's specific to C&J, then yes, we're entertaining putting affordable housing there and doing any type of development there that would be probably mixed use in general. Yes, as part of other things, we're having conversations with Kmart, the owners of Kmart, et cetera, to expand into a mixed use type of environment, to expand more housing options. Part of that is we want all of our housing that we try to work through and develop to count towards our base, especially towards the MBTA demands that we have. I think there's a way to do it. That's why we have the consultant to be able to give us the best pathway to have development and have it count towards our housing stock.
So we have about 10 minutes left, so let's maybe one or two more questions. But do you guys want to ask each other one more question? Do you have anyone lined up?
I don't particularly know.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I'll ask you a question. Is that, again, along the campaign trail, we hear that the items that are priority are water infrastructure, Indian Hill and the Artichoke, road safety, road, street, hail, and NYS. But the fiscal reality is you only get to pick one every 2 years. What would your one be?
Well, I don't know where that one every 2 years concept comes from, because the three projects he named have potential different funding sources. So we talk about Indian Hill, we have the Water Enterprise Fund that is liquid. We have free cash there that can begin processing these designs for that project and the preliminary early start work for that. So that's one area where we could work out of. The second was the Low Street improvements and highway improvements in general. And again, if we get our homework done now, we can be looking at the bill funding, which is available. We have federal grants that are actually dedicated to improving community streets. I see Secretary Pete almost every day going to a community and showing the millions of dollars that the federal government is providing for these services. We just have to be prepared. And then third, NYS. One thing that we need to also consider is NYS does collect revenue independent of the general fund. They collect outside grants, and they also receive fees for service. So if we grow NYS, the costs and the money to help pay for the cost for that can also be covered by their greater productivity. So thank you.
Owen, do you want to ask him the question now, or should I move on?
We can move on.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in the water artichoke, the reason I said there's only one is because we only have so much tax levy available. So we roughly have about $3 million a year in new growth that we taxable increase. 1.4 of that is going to salaries increases in the schools. About 1.1 of that is going to be going towards the new Whittier development, and we've committed to about $300,000 of tax money, which will equate to $2 million of revenue for roads and safety going forward. That doesn't leave within the tax levy itself money for these other projects, inclusive of the enterprise fund. And this is what happens when we get to prioritization of projects. When we get state and federal grant monies, they usually only come to the 20 or 30%, maybe 40% of the total. So with the parking garage, we got $5 million is a great deal. But we spent $5 million, we had to spend $7 million to get the $5 million, and the whole project was 12. That's what's going on with some of these projects in terms of resiliency and infrastructure. They qualify for funds, but we don't get all of that funding going on. Your funding mechanism for NYS, the grants can't be used for that. They need to be used for their programs. The programming and use fees need to be used for the programming and use fees going on. And so it is a taxable type of item, especially since it's a renovation versus a net new build on this. So in many ways, what's going on here is the projects that we all like. Yeah, well, projects that we all like are going to overextend our tax base, and we'll be looking for, potentially, we could be looking for a tax override.
Okay, so you want the last word?
Yes.
Go for it.
So yeah, municipal financing is quite complicated, and we have professionals in the city administration that monitor this stuff. And I'm looking here at our outstanding debt schedule, and as certain projects come on the horizon, we also pay off the debt for others. So this is basically strategizing. And again, I don't know where the reference to these percentages is coming from. I've seen federal grants that pay for 90% or 100% of it. It just depends on how much homework you do and how hard you apply for it. We haven't been doing that. We need to start doing a better job with that. That's why I'm trying to get involved here to advocate for the types of people and to address these needs. And that is becoming creative with how we obtain our financing. And again, we have the water enterprise fund. That is completely separate from the highway fund. And those projects can go in parallel. We just need to plan for it. Thank you.
All right, so one more question. Well, I forgot who I asked first. Owen, glasses on again. Should investor-owned short-term rentals be allowed in the city? Yes or no?
You know, I'm still trying to figure out what an investor-owned definition is. So I would say no until we can define that better.
That's really correct.
I can,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, I've been following this issue, and you know, how do we define an investor? My wife and I decide to buy a second home, and we buy it, finance it outright with our own personal finances. Are we considered investors there? What if my wife and I create 4 different LLCs, and we have LLC A, B, and C that own separate properties? How does that work with the cap that they proposed? I think we need to come up with the idea of what an Airbnb was supposed to be, which was somebody renting out a room or an in-law apartment or some spare space in their building, and you know, allowing its use so they can help afford their property. So yeah, I do have concerns about investor-owned in the sense that it's some private, mysterious entity that nobody knows, and they take housing away from our community. But I don't really have an issue with it if it's a local person like me and my wife that decided to make an investment. Thank you.
Do you want to read the question, or you remember it?
Yeah. Investor-owned, I think there's a proposal now that is a compromise, and I think that they'll be allowed on a certain amount of time and window. You know, short-term rentals of any kind distract from longer-term rentals. It's a fact. Whether we need short-term rentals or not, I think we do, especially in the short term. We don't have adequate space for folks to stay overnight. It does help we are a tourist town. It does help drive that. But investors is another thing. There are people that, you know, this is their sole income and investment and things like that. And, you know, some own more than one property, very few, but they do. Some own a second or a third home to be able to do that. I get it. We can't, as a city, say, because you live here, you can do that, but because you live out of another city or another state, you can't do that. We can't do that. That's against the law. So we have to figure out a way of compromising what we can live with. I think what's proposed now, which is to allow investor owns on a zoning board of appeal basis, special permit, and allow them to go through licensing like everyone else, and to do it for 1 cycle or 2 cycles of that, I think is adequate and fair going forward, and it keeps the rest of the short-term rental population whole. Thank you.
All right, well, I think that's about it. I want to thank the candidates for showing up, and really appreciate it. You know, looking.
Brad. See you, Pat. Take care.
All right, I think we're back on, and I think the audio is improved, so this is Ward 4. Then Harman, Nancy Caswell. What's your So again, no opening closing statements or any questions, so. Sorry for everyone who's been here before, but should investor-owned short-term rentals be allowed in the city, yes or no? Ben?
No.
Can you expand on that?
I think the Airbnb should be allowed for people who live in Newburyport who want to make some extra money on their property. I think as a starting place for regulations on short-term rental units, it would be a bridge too far to include investor properties until we have a better understanding of methodology to define what an investor property is. I think that starting big is, it makes it more difficult to draw back those plans, where if we start with something that's a little bit smaller, we'll have an opportunity to measure, monitor, regulate, understand what enforcement looks like for those Airbnbs that are allowed, and then if we have no problems, then there'll be an opportunity to go and expand that further. I do think that it's important for the community to have we don't have a hotel, so having an option for people to come and stay is important, but I think it's having hotels in neighborhoods and the impact on people, residents who live here year-round is something that we need to be really careful about.
Can I ask him a question, or do you want me to answer first?
No, this is, you have a chance to ask him a question.
Okay.
At some point,
So I believe that short-term rental units, investor-owned and owner-occupied, I'm a yes for that.
Oh.
Okay, just because I've heard yes, but no, but I've heard no, but yes for owner-investor, so I wanted to be clear on that. So from an owner-investor side, I think and door knocking, I've connected with so many ward members who are short-term renting their homes, and they're either doing it from a 3 to 4 week period of time for vulnerable reasons that they might not feel comfortable sharing, but they are very much in need of offering short-term rentals. So from an owner-investor side of things, I think it's very important, and it's taken too long to establish a process. This is an issue that's presented itself in all municipalities across our country. It was an idea that was presented that became clearly an industry in and of itself. So I'm all for the idea of process. I'm not quite sure that the current process on the floor is going to fulfill the needs of neighbors unless we strictly enforce it when it comes to investor-based homes. And so I think we need to continue to work towards investor-owned in our ordinance to understand how that is going to impact our community and how it affects our housing stock, affordable homes, long-term homes, and the implications of not having rentals.
You want to follow to that? Or you
Yeah, no, I'll just agree. I think that the investor properties would likely, if we don't allow them to become Airbnbs, would likely either convert into a full-time residence, a single family or full-time residence, or to turn into long-term rentals. So I fully agree that we have a terrible problem with affordable housing. Working families can't afford to stay in our community. And if we were able to convert some of those investor properties, instead of running them as Airbnbs, to long-term rentals, that would be a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, last word to that? Or you gonna go?
Yeah, our neighbors have far too long taken the brunt of this. They can't be the ones that are enforcing the issues upon us. Neighbors shouldn't be policing neighbors. That's local government. That's where we are involved. That's why we need to implement this ordinance, and that's why we need to see it through the finish line. And we do need to look at the impacts it has in our community on many different levels.
So I commend both of you for running and trying to fill a void in the council, but boy, it's a lot of work. I mean, what I'm hearing is that the ward councils get most of the phone calls, most of the emails, and it's a lot of effort and a lot of time. I mean, considering your you both have, you know, pretty heavy-duty jobs. I mean, do you think you could fit both and do both excellently?
I wouldn't have ever pulled papers if I couldn't do this job with the integrity in which I carry my career. The truth is, I think the more valuable question is, why am I signing up now when I could have potentially slowed down quite a bit? Remember, I went from 3 restaurants to 1 restaurant. I've been actively involved in our community. I'm a serial board member, and so I operate so well under pressure and overflowing plate. So I will say that I certainly would believe that I can do this job, and I have the bandwidth to do this job, and I'm a hard worker. And those who know me know that of me. I will say that I pulled Ward 4 specifically because in many ways my career has trained me for this role to a certain extent. I'm used to putting out fires. I'm used to being communicative, being responsive. It's just who I am. I provide a service, and in return I want to take care of people and provide that same service to them. And I think it's really important to have a strong voice, and I'm somebody who has a strong voice.
Ben, can you do both?
I certainly can. I think the reality is I'm already doing half the work in terms of attending meetings, doing the research, understanding what issues are coming before the different council and committees. I'm doing a lot more of that work now as a candidate. And I saw a situation where, you know, I love Newburyport. I have been excited about living here and learning about its history. And you know, COVID was a bit of a bummer because I was not able to get as active and involved in the community as quickly as I wanted to. This year, I joined the Human Rights Commission as a step toward giving back and doing what I believe so fully in, which is public service. And so I'm really proud of that work, and it's also, you know, I'm advocating for issues as a private citizen that now I saw an opportunity to get off the sidelines when Christine decided not to run for re-election and do my part. And I hope a lot of people in the community will see large and small ways that they can also lean in and be more active in the community. And so if I'm any kind of example of that, great. Just, you know, 3 issues that are really important that I'm hearing about that really inspire and motivate me to do that work are, you know, kids, NYS, climate change, and the harmful effects of what we're seeing, and affordable housing, like we've already started a conversation about, and I hope we can talk more about.
Yeah, I think I could.
So, there are a lot of folks out here who like trees.
Trees.
They really do. And they're saying that we shouldn't be cutting down trees near Pioneer Park. And a lot of folks who think that the main goal is to improve safety for kids and their parents and anyone who uses that area. So has the city council done a good enough job making the case for going forward with chopping down trees?
You got a way of putting the question. You know, this is a tough one for me. I'm a person who really cares about the environment. I believe in the positive effects of old growth trees. But for me, it comes down to safety first and foremost. This is another one of the projects that we'll be discussing all night long that have been debated hotly for a long time. And I think we have a real opportunity to enhance the experience for kids and families using the Pioneer League and the Lower Atkinson Park. And also, if we create more infrastructure around parking there, I'm hopeful that it can also lead to more year-round use when people feel more welcomed and have greater access. That being said, I think the city is revising their proposal in order to mitigate and take in some of the feedback. I think this is the public, you know, process working. I've heard from folks that have concerns. I've heard from folks on Plummer Ave that live next door, and I understand that. I've had to have some hard conversations with them that we have to juggle some of these competing priorities around the environment and safety, but I have to prioritize safety first. And I think there's other elements of this project that will be net improvement for the wetlands accessibility, the thoughtful design of runoff water. So it is tough to think about losing trees, but I think in the end, if we see this project through, we'll replace those trees. We'll see a much more thoughtfully designed park and an experience for neighbors.
It's your turn.
Sure. So I think one of the reasons why I'm running for city council is because I want to focus on the process, right? I want to focus on the people, the purpose, the process. I want to understand essentially what the intention is about investing the dollars in the Pioneer League. And so Certainly the Lower Atkinson building, Lower Atkinson Park needs to be, I think, reactivated in a way of using it as a more formal open space, especially for the individuals living around it. And so I know there's concerns around the investment aspect of the dollars going into the Pioneer League for a total of 4 months, and exactly how many spots do we actually need. Our current city councilor, Christine Wallace, has put an extraordinary amount of time into this project. She's taken so much information from the neighbors surrounding the park on traffic issues, access to Lower Atkinson, concerns around some of the conservation wetlands, some of the runoff, some of the natural swells that are there. I've asked questions of conservation when we did the walkthrough about materials that were being used. I'm not quite sure that we need to have as many spots that we're putting forth in the plan. I'm excited to hear that we are revisiting that plan, but in the end, whether we consider arborvitae's a tree or not, we can continue to argue that. I think in the end, what we need to do is find compromise within the community and understand that there might be a loss of anywhere between 10 to 12 trees at minimum at the park.
Do you want to say anything else, Ben, or are you good?
No, yeah, I'll just add, I think one of my core beliefs is that I am not an expert on everything, and I want to make sure that as a city councilor, we do our homework, we ask those experts to weigh in, and then we trust them to do their jobs. So from the Conservation Committee to environmental groups that we consult with, I'm not going to be a councilor who tries to wear every hat, but I want to do my homework and make sure that we're tapping into those resources that are available in part of the process. And just one additional comment that I think is worth calling out, which is, invasive trees are down there that don't add to the environment and the ecological system. There's Norway maples that basically create a dead area around them. And so, and also in speaking to experts about this project, the bringing in newer growth trees with older growth trees actually enhances the health of the ecosystem. And so I think what we could see in the end is something that's greater than what's there today, even with the loss of some of the current trees.
Mm-hmm.
Last word?
Yeah, I would just add that there might even be potential to transition these trees to other locations, perhaps. We never know, right? Some of them are impacted when we did do the walkthrough, and there is some concern about what the benefit of new trees could be for the area as well. But I would agree with Ben's sentiment.
I think it's your turn. Right? It's your turn.
I don't know.
You're in charge.
All right, sorry.
Yes.
So the Citizens for Responsible Education is holding another forum next week. What are your overall thoughts about that group?
I was at the high school this week to do a candidate forum with the students there, and they put together a really thoughtful question about this. I'll just read a little bit of it and then provide my comments. But at Newburyport High School, inclusivity is part of the culture that we purport to value. It is something that is reflected in our library. Recently, some community members have sought to remove books from the school library that they view as offensive. Typically, these have been titles related to LGBTQ+ and minority rights topics. As a member of the LGBTQ community myself, I fully reject banning books. I think that representation matters, both in terms of who we elect as our officials and how we provide resources to the students in our community. And it is, in my mind, not the place of an outside group to come in and dictate that.
Yes, I will say in a city in which I love so much, it's certainly incredibly frustrating to learn about the CRE and the way that they have established themselves here in our city and the impressions that they've left throughout the community. I've sat on the board for the YWCA and have been an advocate for their racial justice committee, and I'm beyond frustrated by the way in which this organization is working and the ideas in which they believe we should be removing books off of shelves. Kids deserve the opportunity to go to school and open their minds and have resources and a safe place to ask questions and feel comfortable with the educators that are put in place by the council or the school committee that appoints them. We have tremendous support tremendous admiration for our teachers, right? And ultimately our kids deserve a place that they can go to school and pick up the book that they choose to want to pick up. So I will leave you with just the fact that it blows my mind that we're in a place today where an organization has established itself in this way.
Any more thoughts? Are you good?
The reason I had to come late to this, and thank you for accommodating my schedule, is I was on a board meeting for Point Foundation, which is the largest LGBTQ scholarship granting organization essentially in the world. I believe fully in education. My mom was an elementary school educator for 25 years. My mother-in-law was also an elementary school educator here locally. And I just want to shout out the hardworking individuals in our school districts and our school system that are coming up against these challenges. And encourage everybody listening who hasn't already checked out the school committee race to make sure you're making really thoughtful choices.
And just continue to applaud Gallagher, right? I feel like I should make sure
Say that again?
to support Gallagher. I think he's doing a great job.
So, Nancy, would you like to ask your opponent a question?
Oh. So here's the deal. Don't get upset with me.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I said from the beginning when I was running for council that I was going to be who I am in this campaign, and you know, it's not my leadership style or the individual that I am to present a question to Ben in a way that would, you know, catch him off guard. It's not how I manage my team. It wouldn't be how I would work with council on the ground. It just isn't a place that I feel like it's necessary to go, and I don't think it determines who's the best candidate for Ward 4 Council. So quite honestly, if I have to ask Ben a question, because I don't want you to get upset with me, I'm just going to ask him what he had for breakfast this morning.
I mean, which is a thank you. And
Did you skip breakfast?
I don't eat breakfast.
That's why you should vote for me. Ben doesn't eat breakfast, guys.
I had split pea soup from Middle Street for lunch.
Ooh, soups
First
at
meal of the
Mill
day.
Street are a good idea.
Do you want to ask her a question, or are you afraid to now?
I'm not afraid. And Nancy, thank you. I think I've enjoyed spending time with you out holding signs and on the campaign trail, and I appreciate the other two candidates who are no longer in the race. I think we've had a pretty good time having a good conversation, and so thank you for that. I did come up with a question.
Oh, it's okay.
Hopefully it doesn't put you on the
No,
spot.
not at all.
But one of the best parts about the campaign for me has been talking to voters and getting a sense of what's on their minds. So in the spirit of elevating our Ward 4 residents, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about anything that you've heard from voters so far in the race that we haven't covered so far tonight.
Sure. Well, we haven't discussed, obviously, the streets and sidewalks, right? And as we've been door knocking and as I've been walking these streets, it's very important for us to make this a priority. I understand that we have, you know, Wayne Amaral coming into play. We want to give him time to adjust to his new position and certainly evaluate the needs. But I think it's really important that we continue to focus on some streets in our ward that need some support. Specifically, you know, I'm glad that we're tackling Willow. I was just walking that road last week and learned about the two homes that were experiencing flooding. I can totally hear and understand, listen to the concerns around Rawson Ave and no sidewalks on that street, especially being an emergency outlet to Anna Jake's Hospital. There are kids living on that street. As a resident of Ashland Street or past resident of Ashland Street, the need is there too. So definitely streets and sidewalks. There's a lot of concern about the Whittier project. A lot of people recently reading about it. And, do you want me to not? Okay. You know, there's concern about the Whittier project. A lot of people asking why all of a sudden is this coming out of nowhere. If you're going to ask it, I won't take up too much more of my time. But Whittier is coming up often in our conversation. I think that's, once again, my interest in wanting to run for city council for transparency, communication, being responsive, continuing to educate our residents so they understand what's happening in council chambers.
Any last word on that, or any rebuttal to that?
No.
I think so. All right. So, Nancy, say the city gets a huge surplus of free cash. What are you going to do with that kind of money? Would you lower taxes, or would you spend it on quality projects?
My husband will tell you I'll spend it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, how much money are we talking about here, right? I mean, we have priorities, right?
The question, I should say, the actual question, would you rather use surplus free cash to lower taxes or spend on new projects? That's the official question.
I mean, okay, let's discuss that a little bit. So I think the challenge here is that we have quite a bit of new projects on deck. And what's most important is to develop a strategic plan around what's most important and what we can accomplish now, probably similar to what you were asking earlier, or maybe the previous Ward 5 counselor asked this question. If there was an amount of money, I would say, can we strike a balance between both? Can we look at the potential of what new revenue is going to be coming in, including the addition of the surplus, and find ways in which we could lower or at least maintain a tax rate and invest in 2 large projects? I think there's an opportunity to strike a balance for all things potentially in proper forecasting, but I mean, we have to think about the incurred debt that we're going to experience with these new projects and what impacts that might have on our bond rating as we incur more debt.
So same question to you, I'll say it again because I fluffed it the first time. Would you rather use surplus free cash to lower taxes or spend on new projects?
My instinct on this is to use that money to lower taxes. I think that we have a strong capital improvement, very, very long list of proposals. We do have many projects at various states of readiness, and I think we should be thoughtful about how we fund those through the finance and accounting in City Hall. But I think an opportunity to lower taxes and provide some relief is the right thing to do.
Any rebuttal on that? Are you good?
No, I have to rebut because the reality is we're looking at a budget of, even if we were looking at our past session, we're looking at 90 million. We're looking at an investment into the school system. We have additional debt coming on into play if we embrace Whittier, looking at 25 million there. If we do the NYS project, even option 2 or the option 2 and option 3, we're looking somewhere between 6 to at 8 or 9 million. We're looking at Brown School. We have water issues we need to focus on. So I would love the opportunity to tell people that I would lower taxes, but the reality is I think with the projects that we have coming into play, that would be a promise that I'm not quite sure I could stand behind. I would focus on keeping it to where it is today and maybe slightly reducing, but I can't promise a tax cut with the incurred debt that we are going to be experiencing if we say yes to all these projects.
Last word, Ben?
Yeah, I think lowering the tax rate for a resident is different than funding projects. I think it's 82.7 million is the budget that we just approved. I think our schools are funded, and my conversations with officials there, that feels like we're doing our job, or the current council is doing their job in terms of working with the school systems to make sure that they're adequately funded. And based on the proposal that was put forward, we're talking about $39 for NYS. For an average single-family household income, their tax would go up $39 on an annual basis. So I'm not saying we would cut all taxes. I'm saying I would return those funds to the taxpayers and make sure that we're funding projects through bonds and other mechanisms as we should.
So same idea, same vein. So should the mayor take another swing at a split tax rate, Ben?
I do think that a modest increase in the tax rate for business and industrial would also be an opportunity to provide some relief to taxpayers on the residential side. I was a little bit surprised with how quickly this thing fell when it was proposed last time, and so I would definitely need to do more work to understand the implications of it before I could weigh in on one side or the other. But I do applaud Mayor Reardon for coming up with some creative ways to try to provide some relief to taxpayers, especially in that moment and in the current environment where we see inflation and we see some of the difficulty with folks coming up with the means to stay in Newburyport. If that's a lever, then I think it's one worth exploring.
Nancy, your turn.
Sure. In full transparency, when this current interest presented itself this past year, I did reach out to current council members and did speak with hopes that we would apply ARPA fund dollars that were injected into our budget in an effort to not increase taxes for local residents and to not move forward with the split tax. We had the opportunity to appoint these dollars to this use, and certainly ARPA dollars could be used the same way tax dollars are being used for local infrastructure needs. My research and when I was thinking about the split tax piece was certainly that there have been other municipalities in the Commonwealth that adopted this and then actually transitioned backwards to just doing one tax piece. So I think that there are business implications where, you know, small businesses are still going to be impacted by this because of triple net leases and how taxes get rolled down to us in our lease agreements. However, we certainly will need to get creative in budget season when we're thinking about our tax rate. And I'd like to include the conversation around taking a stab at potentially a different tax rate for elders who have been a part of our community for a long-standing period of time as an option to help them and support.
Ben, you want to say anything else, or? Do you believe in, I mentioned this in the first one, but do you believe there's a lot of foot dragging going on in the city council right now, Ben? Do you feel like there are a lot of projects that are stuck, going nowhere, or any thoughts about that?
I have a growing respect for the process that the council follows as I've gotten more involved in the last few months. And so I understand that things necessarily take time. Design, funding sources, vetting through various agencies. That being said, you know, what I'm here for as a public servant that I'm raising my hand to be a city councilor is to be a vote towards making progress. And I think whether or not we can agree on 100% of something, you know, may be in question. But I think more often than not, there are areas that we can find common ground on and move something forward. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the full-scale project. But I would like to see the council look for ways to make incremental progress more quickly for residents and for some of the real needs that are before our community. I look at NYS and I see a project where we purchased a building, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in design, and yet we still see people, you know, presenting roadblocks. The Brown School is another example where we have a prime opportunity with a city-owned asset to create affordable senior housing, and now we're debating a gym. And I think it feels a bit to me like we often find things to debate to keep things from getting done.
Your turn, Nancy. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I think that local governance is interesting, right? I mean, we have Ward 4 councilors, we have at-large councilors, we have different ways in which we retain information. I'm certainly somebody who's data-driven. I think anybody who knows me from speaking in council over the 13, 14 years that I've been actively doing so, you know that I tend to look at the details, give me the details, give me the data, let me think it through the way that I want to think it through, and then, but also find ways to bring it to a table so we can have great conversation. I think it's important to ask questions. I'm not necessarily sure that there's foot dragging necessarily. However, I do feel like there's a need to have fresh blood come into council in a way that we can focus on the important aspects of local governance. You know, the idea of being transparent, being responsive, being collaborative, and finding ways to get to a place where we can be successful in finalizing projects and moving the city forward.
Anything else, Ben?
Yeah, I agree. I think we do need fresh perspective on the council, and I hope it's mine.
What do you want me to say to that?
So I'm going to ask the elephant in the room question again. So do you support moving Newburyport through services to 59 Low Street? Yes or no, Nancy?
Yes, I am. As a Ward 4 resident, I certainly am in support enthusiastically. I think that the NYS has been displaced for far too long. I think there could have been actions taken initially with the Brown School. I think there's opportunity to see it through NYS. I think that as a Ward 4 councilor, my next step, if I'm elected then, would be to reconnect with the individuals that I've been meeting door knocking and get them to see the buy-in in the project. I think there's a lot of questions around how much is it going to cost us once again, right? How much money do we have in budget? How's it going to affect my taxes? Totally understand where Ben's coming with a $39 budgeted number that came from a fiscal report back in February of 2023. But those numbers came from, I believe, building this building. Inflation has happened. Prevailing wages are certainly more expensive as are materials. So we need a realistic number. As somebody said to me on the street the other day, they said, would you build an extension or an addition to your home if you didn't know how much it cost, right? The reality is, it would be reckless for me to say, yes, let's do this without knowing. Certainly we need to see the number, but as a resident, certainly want to see this project come through, and as a small business owner, I'm certainly creative enough to find ways to, I think, find the funding to make it work.
Shall I repeat the question, or do you?
Do I support 59 Low Street?
Correct.
Yes, I do. I'm very passionate about Newburyport Youth Services. I believe that they do incredible work on behalf of not just kids in the community, but marginalized kids in the community, underserved populations, providing safe spaces and programming that helps to develop them into not just successful kids, but the next generation of leaders for our community. And I think we have done a disservice to the staff and volunteers that do that work day in and day out by not providing them with a place to go to do their job. I mean, this is the most essential thing that we should be doing as a city. We can debate drawings and budgets and all of these other things. We can find a number that we can get past, and we should do it now. I think we, as I said earlier, we've bought 59 Low Street. We've done the design work. We do need to see the process through. I fully agree, and we need to be responsible, and we need to put pressure on the assumptions that go into the plan. But we need to move with greater urgency, because we're going to graduate a whole other class of Newburyport kids who have suffered without the proper investment that we owe them.
Nancy, you want to, any more comments about that?
No, I think I agree with Ben. I think the other sentiment I would say too is that I think that it would be beneficial too to continue the process growing together as the administration and as a council, right? I believe that city council is the yin and the yang of our mayor, and so I want to see the designs. I want to see the interest with council being more involved in giving pushback. So it doesn't just come to the council chambers with, this is the presentation, how do you feel about it? You know, yes or no, but more so just, because then that's when we're asking all the questions that I think delays progress in moving things forward. I think there's more opportunity for us to be working together, so we're not delaying as much time as I think we're experiencing, which might be leading to the question of why you think there's been some foot dragging.
Your last word.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's room for collaboration. I believe that word so essentially in my heart, but there are clear lines of responsibility with this project. It is up to the administration to understand the needs of their department, understand the capabilities of us from a budget standpoint, and it is up to the city council to approve the zoning and to approve that budget. And so we should collaborate, we should work together, but we should also have clear understanding of our roles and responsibilities in that process. So that's all.
So, Ben, what do you think is the most, I mean, I asked this question in the paper once, but what's the most important issue in the city right now? Go.
Infrastructure, climate change, infrastructure. We have decaying and crumbling in places, aging infrastructure. We have nobody's talking, or that I've heard, about our water supply and the vulnerability of our water supply. I mean, I love NYS. I love Brown School and affordable housing. We should do those things, but none of that stuff matters if people can't have clean drinking water. So I think we need to be examining, and I'm excited about DPS Director Emerald being on board and taking a fresh look at some of the streets and sidewalks plans. I'm excited that we have a streets and sidewalks plan that's being looked at again with fresh perspective under Emerald, and I think it's great that we're being smarter about how we sequence and time those projects so that we're taking care of what's underneath the surface and before we do the part that we can see, and it makes it easier for us to walk and get around. But as we all experienced this summer, we're having more extreme climate and weather events, and the flooding's not just in Market Square, it's right in front of my house on High Street at times when those crazy weather events come. And who knows what winter will hold for us. And so I think we need to be taking a hard look at those investments and making sure that what we're building in these plans that the city is putting forward will see us through to the next 40 years.
Nancy?
Yeah, I would honestly agree with Ben. I think infrastructure is super important. It's layered, of course, right? We talk about streets and sidewalks. We're talking about the water program. We certainly need to talk about, the issues that present itself potentially with the artichoke and where we go with Indian Hills. That's for another conversation. We have the culvert concerns that we have down on the square. The potential of changing this culvert also means further investment in the state State Street potentially with catch basins or other ways to retain the amount of water that we are in fact seeing and certainly experiencing here. We have challenges around the designs of our streets and traffic calming concerns between Merrimack and High Street. Also, again, big picture thinking when we're talking about going from the ground up, thinking about ways in which we can be more smart about the execution of these streets and sidewalks as well. Look at beautiful Plummer and what it's offered our community, and now every street in our ward wants that one as well too, right? But the goal here is the important priority things besides NYS and thinking about affordable housing is certainly looking towards the idea of enjoying drinking our tap water and the water here in Newburyport. And maybe not so much the sexy things. I mean, we really got to focus on the infrastructure.
Ben, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, just because I have minutes, I'm going to take them. I think the other element that goes into some of this infrastructure is really safety. Enhancing the safety for pedestrians in ways that will encourage people to get out of their cars, and that will also affect some of our climate mitigation goals and hopes and dreams. I hear a lot from folks about the ability to cross High Street and the traffic and the speed that people use there. I know there's a lot of conversation around the speeds along Merrimack Street, and there's a bit of an art to this. So we're not just doing pipes and asphalt. We have an ability to thoughtfully design crosswalks in ways that will make it easier and safer for people to get around at the same time as we're investing in that infrastructure. So it's win-win-win for me. I think it's about prioritizing and making sure that as a city councilor, I would be a watchdog to make sure that we're achieving those deliverables on the timelines and the budgets that we're set for.
Last word on that? Or anything else?
I mean, I think at the end we're still talking about infrastructure altogether and the need to continue to listen and be responsive. And the idea is to properly plan for them, build a capital plan that we understand the dollars that are going to be coming our way and can find ways to find emergency funds for if in fact the project isn't happening now but could potentially break in the near future, like the potential of this culvert. So again, I think it's just about listening and being capable of responding to the ward's needs and continuing to understand what's happening right in front of their front door that affects the quality of their life.
So we have time for one more question, and which is the Whittier question now. So I asked the mayor's office about this, so it should be right. According to the mayor's office, Newburyport's share towards the proposed new Whittier Tech School is $35.7 million, which works out to $69 million after annual $2.3 million debt service payments over 30 years. With 29 students currently enrolled at Whittier, how will you sell this to taxpayers should you become elected? I think. Thanks. You go first.
Sure. Well, first, let's just talk about, I mean, I come from a trades family. My husband is a plumber. I'm in the industry. I have alum that work for me, so I understand Whittier's need to redesign this project. I think the challenge here is that certainly it's coming at a time in which it feels like out of nowhere, right? That's the frustrating part. You know, the reality is that we have known about this. We should have been discussing it probably more profoundly early on this year. We knew that it was going to impact us. We knew that it might cripple the additional projects that we have in place. We do know that there is a vote in place. We've actually recently elected Donahue to support us in that effort. We know that we have to go with other regions to vote this project in. We do understand that Haverhill and Lawrence could impact the way that this vote goes. It's going to be a challenging budget season if in fact this goes through, and it certainly makes it even more difficult to discuss taxes at this point. But we understand that it could be somewhere between $300 to $400 that could impact residents on an annual basis for the next 30 to 33 or 34 years, so we need to pay attention to that and certainly ask more questions. And lastly, get more support. We need to focus on the MSBA, get them to be a little bit more transparent in how they're developing this project and getting to these numbers, and also work with Senator Bruce Tarr, and lastly with the administration, both Healy and Driscoll, in discussing what we can do as a state to invest in the trade program. Previous Governor Baker and Polito certainly wanted to invest in the trade program, and I think there's opportunity for us to chase more money from those outlets to support this if it does go through.
Do you want to repeat that question, or do you got it?
I think I have it. I will say I think vocational education is fantastic and critical, and I think that we are seeing that a lot of younger folks are looking at different pathways than when I grew up, which was, you're going to college for 4 years and that's that. And so I think it's important that we preserve those options for residents. I think there are ways that I would love to see Newburyport schools themselves explore infusing more vocational options for us to reach more of those students. I think this is certainly a very complex issue, and I will admit I am not fully up to speed on it, and so as such, I want to be a counselor who does his homework, so I'll weigh in as much as I'm comfortable, but it may not be satisfactory to you, Dave. But I think we need to coordinate with our regional partners to make sure that we are vetting this and making sure that it's fair and it makes sense for the level of investment that Newburyport would be making first. And I think second, exploring other pathways to secure funding through grants, state, federal, because I think there's a push and initiative toward vocational education, which I support, but hitting the pocketbooks of Newburyport folks at $300 or $400 on an annual basis is pretty material for us to just rubber stamp. So I need to do more homework, but I also I think it's certainly a process that we need to fully vet and make sure that that the community is brought in on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it speaks to the fact of why I want to run for council, because here's somebody like Ben who is very involved in the community and certainly trying to learn, and the reality is people that are that committed to following what's happening in our city and in the community are not aware of Whittier. And I've been discussing Whittier now for a couple months because I knew it was going to come down the pipeline. And the reality is once again, these conversations need to be had and we need to follow them. And we need to be responsive and we need to find ways in which we can communicate down to the residents what's really going to be impacting us. Because I understand as residents we get frustrated if a project isn't being completed and then suddenly this one comes in, and it's beyond frustrating.
Last word?
Yeah, it's just I'll add that I'm committed to being transparent and open with residents in two ways. Listening and speaking. Right, I want to be informing, but I also want to hear from folks. And so I just as we approach topics like this, I want to do my homework, but I also part of that homework is hearing from residents and their feelings about it. I can think of one supporter whose daughter is a student at Whittier, who I'm going to call when I walk out the parking lot and have a follow-up conversation. And so it's the kind of counselor that I want to be, is someone that's approachable and that is both listening and communicating and sharing information.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, Nancy. 2. Jennie Donahue, who's a counselor, Ward 2, and her opponent, Stephanie Niketic. Do you support moving the Newburyport Youth Services to 59 Low Street, yes or no? Stephanie,
Yes.
can you go into that a little bit?
I think the decision has pretty much already been made. There's been a consensus around it. That's what the administration wants. That's what many counselors want. That's what most of the people who use youth services seem to want. So I don't think it's a question of does youth services go to Low Street. The question still is, what will it be and how much will it cost? And those answers still haven't been given to people. So we're waiting for that, and the mayor has said that the 90% design plan is close to being ready, and it can be presented to the public and to the council, and at 90% design, we'll have a better idea of what it will actually cost. So I'm waiting anxiously for that information.
Jenny, same question to you.
Sure, thank you. Is this a good distance from the mic?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. 100% I support MYS at 59 Low Street, and I'd like to kind of give you some background as to why. When I grew up here, this was a pretty quiet, sleepy town without much but latchkey kids to find their own devices after school for a lot of us. There was nothing like youth services here. I don't think it's a question of are they valuable, do we all support them? I think we do. I think anyone that's been here for a reasonable amount of time would agree that this is about having something really positive for our children to keep them from their own devices at those vulnerable ages. So that being said, I 100% support what has come so far. I am also anxiously waiting the 90% design, and I don't see any reason why we can't go with the middle of around $5-ish million, which is what there was a fair amount of consensus on. So I'm pretty confident, and I really hope that we will just be able to button this up very soon, sooner than later, before our kids age out.
Stephanie,
Well, just to say that people agreed on, or thought we could get to around 5.7 million when it was 20% design, and it was months ago, and we know what is happening to project costs. So $5.7 million, I don't know what it will do, and I think it's very important that we have options in this design to make sure that we're getting to a number that can be afforded with all of the other capital needs that we have.
Jenny, last word of that?
Sure, yes. I do believe that finding a home and having it built and complete for NYS is definitely one of our most prominent needs. And if it makes it more, if it ends up being 8 million or 9 million, I do believe it is a priority that is worth putting forward. And it's not something that we're going to turn back on now. So there's plenty to be discussed, but we're well on our way. I don't see any we're well past the point of return, I guess you could say.
So, Stephanie, I'm curious, why did you decide to run for office? I mean, was it organic? Was someone asking you to run? You know, I'd really like to know your thought process before getting on the board here.
Yes, I have Ward 2 friends and neighbors who asked me to run, and I think that people were becoming concerned about the way things were going with our representation for some time, but the key moment for many was when the split rate tax was voted down, and Councilor Donahue was one of the people who voted against it.
Jenny, any rebuttal to that?
Sure. Yes, I was one of the counselors that did vote it down. It was certainly not a split vote. But also, considering that as a Ward 2 representative, you're not just representing the residents, you really are responsible for the downtown to remain thriving. And as was mentioned before, we really truly have to consider what fabric makes our unique downtown unique with our small mom and pop businesses. They cannot absorb, in this climate, even the slightest increase that would be passed on to them. They can't even afford to hire people. So while I would love to have the split tax rate have been the answer for our residents to feel some relief, I truly believe that if we had gone that way, it would have been a matter of months before our downtown, that is so thriving, would be boarded up, and then shortly thereafter full of commercial businesses. So unfortunately, it was a very difficult decision to make, but I did vote in favor of spending the free cash on some tax relief, and I also very much am committed to finding tax relief for those who need it most. Our elderly, people with disabilities that own homes and do upgrades to their homes, our low and working class families. We need to re-examine the abatement programs we have, the assessment programs that we have, and truly look at who we need to help.
Do you want to say anything else, Stephanie? or-
Yes, the mayor's proposal for the split rate tax actually would not have done much to raise business taxes. And 71% of businesses would have still gotten a decrease in taxes. So this wasn't something that was going to board up the downtown in months. We have a situation now where residents pay 90% of the real estate taxes. And it's not because we own 90% of the land. We own about 35% of the land. It's because in assessments, the value per square foot of residential property is much higher than business. And so we are getting very out of balance in terms of the tax burden on residents versus businesses.
Jenny, last word on this?
Yes, also, split tax rates are very unique, and while they do sound attractive for the residents to see relief, Newburyport is a very small city, and a split tax rate really doesn't fit the criteria of a split tax rate. Those are really meant for municipalities that are predominantly properties that are owned by businesses and commercial real estate, not residential. We're not in that, we don't have that kind of demographic. So it just didn't feel appropriate either. And I would absolutely be remiss to not say that even a slight increase on a business that is small is going to go down to the business manager and the staff, and it is going to affect them, and the mom and pops can't take those raises in the rent. So that's it.
So I guess it's fair to say, Stephanie, that you think the mayor should revisit the split tax rate?
Yes, and actually that happens every year, not necessarily the mayor proposes one, but the council can still talk about it. We set a tax rate every year, and every year we make a decision, will we have a single rate or will we have a split rate? So, absolutely.
Jenny, do you think the mayor should do that?
I still don't think it's the right thing for Newburyport. I think there's other ways to find relief for people that need it, and that's what we should be pursuing.
So, Stephanie, I thought you were going to say that you decided to run because Jenny reintroduced the idea of retail pot and put some down in Ward 2. So that's the reason I thought you ran.
I decided earlier than that because the split rate vote was last November, but that certainly contributed to the encouragement I got to run, and it's something that, as a resident, as a citizen, I opposed in the city council.
Jenny, any?
That's very interesting. See, I found it very kind and thoughtful when my opponent called me with a courtesy call to let me know she was pulling papers, but it was made very clear, explicitly clear, that it had nothing to do with bringing back cannabis for a conversation. That my opponent was entirely indifferent towards it, so I find that interesting. But I'm also not really sure, Dave, what exactly is the relevance. It's long dead in the water. There's no pursuing of it. It's not anything that's happening. It was a conversation that I wanted to have to see if there was an ability to bring in much needed revenue. There clearly is not an appetite for that, so end of story. That's it.
Stephanie, any comments on that?
Well, sure. I just want to say that, yes, I did call Jennie to let her know that I was running. And the conversation that we had earlier, before I had made that decision about her idea to reintroduce retail marijuana, was one in which I suggested to her that if she was going to do that, she was going to get big pushback, and the best way to do it was to go back to the idea of maybe having it at the traffic circle. But what she proposed was to have it downtown on Pond Street and at the Tavern with no buffers for playgrounds, daycare, residents. She removed all of the buffers and reduced the required state public school buffer to 200 feet.
Last word for you, Jennie. Do you want to say anything else?
Sure. So to be clear, the proposal was entirely a draft. There never was an actual proposal. It was a concept proposal. And it was really based on what the state had loosened up. So the removal of certain buffers were literally because the state no longer required them. And it was pretty boilerplate what was the draft. And the only thing that was ever actually introduced to council was a communication to have a conversation. That was it.
So I asked Councilman McCauley this question before you arrived. Have you ever voted for something you personally disagree with because it's what constituents wanted? Can you give me an example if you have?
That's a great question. Give me think for a moment. Well, to be fair, I feel like there's been a lot of things that haven't come up to vote yet, where that would be the case. I feel like I often do truly listen to what my constituents are saying to me when I make my decisions to vote. So, I mean, it weighs pretty heavily on every decision I make. I don't know that I could say one example.
Any comment to that or rebuttal?
Well, I guess I could go back to the tax question where I believe that Jennie did get a lot of emails from residents who were in favor of the split rate tax. But especially the question about short-term investment rentals in Ward 2. It's a very unpopular idea, investment units in Ward 2. And I know because often I get a copy, and this is because I've been an advocate against this for years. I'll often get copies of emails that are sent to counselors. So I have a list. I know how many people from Ward 2 have communicated with the full council and Jennie about this, and her voting record on it has made me wonder who she's listening to, because it didn't seem to be residents.
Last word, Jennie?
So we had one vote last year on some amendments, which failed. I compromised for one amendment, and that was to allow for a single investor-owned unit, and that was in the spirit of compromise. That's it. We failed it anyway, and there have not been any votes since. So I'm not entirely sure about the plural of votes, but I am listening very closely, and this is a really complicated decision to make. But the consensus is absolutely in the Ward 2 and the downtown that investor-owned is not welcome, but it's also the consensus fairly citywide. So it's giving a lot of us councilors quite a bit of food for thought. We're not there yet.
So I'll just go to the next generic question that we asked twice already. Should investor-owned properties, short-term rentals, should investor-owned short-term rentals be allowed in the city? Yes or no?
No.
Any follow-up to that?
So what an investor unit means is it's a dwelling unit, which someone it's not their primary residence, and they don't live there. It is a way for them to make money. It's a business. The Massachusetts Supreme Court has called it business. So these are businesses, and I am opposed to allowing them on mainland Newburyport. They exist because they're customary and historic on Plum Island. They would continue to exist, but no Massachusetts community has allowed them. And if Ed Cameron is still here, I've heard that from several credible people, including last night from Councilor Cameron. So they have implications for neighborhood integrity, traffic, parking, noise, and housing. And I hear a lot of people focus on the word affordable. They have an impact on available housing. Available. So any loss of long-term housing in Newburyport hurts us. And so I am opposed to them.
Jenny, same question to you.
I am not in favor of the investor-owned short-term rental unit. I do feel it does take away from the housing stock availability. Certainly not affordable. It will never be affordable. However, I think it's worth noting that a lot of the same issues that come up from the bad players of short-term rental units that are investor-owned certainly come up with long-term rentals and even home ownership as well. And in a lot of cases, you cannot choose your neighbors. So part of me really does wish there was a way to keep out the absentee investor-owned, but there isn't. And so we do, to some degree, have to weigh what we're taking away from homeowners who are invested with an additional home to do this. And this is, as stated, a business, but it's a home business, not unlike many home businesses or businesses a lot of folks work from home. It's not much different than that. But like any neighbors, there's good players and bad players. What we can't do is just turn a blind eye and do nothing. We have to absolutely get something on the books so we can weed out the bad players with regulation. But I just really would like to come to a compromise and get something we can actually control.
So you use the word affordable. Do you think Newburyport? Do you think a middle-class family can live in Newburyport these days?
No. No.
Is that? I mean, that just sounds sad to me. Do you agree with that? Is that sad?
It's devastating to me. I grew up here, and most folks I know cannot afford to live here. I myself count myself incredibly fortunate to have bought a house at a time when nobody was looking for vinyl-sided houses built in the 80s. But the antique homes, they have drawn people here for the past 30 years, and I can't say we didn't ask for it. We were not taking care of what we had. And when people started to realize the intrinsic value of the integrity of this city and decided to invest themselves in it, it changed the city entirely. And in my opinion, it's all been for the better. Growing up here, you didn't know what these homes looked like, and to see them now in their original glory is phenomenal. However, it's not affordable. And the housing stock is abysmal, rental stock is non-existent, and people that work here typically cannot afford to live here. And we really need to start looking at our zoning and do something to create more affordable units, more rental units, more affordable homes for people to buy, more smart growth districts, and it certainly goes a lot further beyond what we can do at the Brown School. So it's a big picture, and I'm actually very excited to be joining the Housing Choice Coalition that is starting up very much now. So that is near and dear to my heart. Thank you.
Same question to you, Stephanie. Sorry, I got that right.
That's okay. Just a last point on investor short-term rentals. The people who have purchased these homes, not to work in them, but to rent them out as though they're hotels, can also rent them long-term. And in Newburyport, Long-term rentals are pretty lucrative as well, but they do provide homes for people. And they do not have the same impact on neighborhoods as the revolving door of an Airbnb.
Can you go to the
Sure,
question?
I'll go to the question. Which is?
Oh, I mean, the middle class can't afford to live here anymore. Is that sad?
It's extremely sad. I moved here when I was 23, and my first apartment, which is a big apartment, was $300 a month. And I know that can't happen anymore. I bought my first house here, and so it's changed quite a bit. It's very sad. It excludes a lot of people that we need in our community. And the good news is that the city officials are working on zoning right now, which will increase the ability for multi-unit housing to go into certain corridors in Newburyport, including an expansion of the 40R. I think it was mentioned earlier that we have a $50,000 grant to look at the Story Avenue corridor as a mixed. Oh, sorry. Okay. So it's happening.
So, Stephanie, when asked by the Daily News whether the city does enough to spread and support diversity, we answered that the real barrier to diversity in Newburyport is the lack of housing opportunities. But what I really wanted to know is, like, how are the folks who are living here now? Is there enough diversity in Newburyport right now? And not just wealth, but just
Well, that's
diversity.
no, there's not, and that's the reason why is we don't have a diverse housing. So when I moved here, it was very diverse. It was a great community. And that has gone away. The economic diversity has certainly gone away. And the reason for it is we don't have diverse housing stock. So
I guess what I'm trying to
that's
say
my
is
answer.
I'm trying to folks like the LGBTQ community and the gay pride, stuff like that. That's what I was hoping.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, because when I moved here, there was a very big gay community, and I think there still is. So I'm not sure we've lost diversity on that, and I think it's wonderful. And I know I knew Fran Dalton when she was Frank Dalton, and that was, it was no big deal. So this was in the 80s when she transitioned, and she was loved as well as ever in Newburyport. Everyone was proud of her, and she's loved now, in memory. So I never had a sense back then that there was ever a problem with that kind of diversity in Newburyport, or that people rejected it. So,
Well, Jennie, do you think the city could do more in terms of the LGBTQ community and folks who feel marginalized anyway?
Of course.
What can they do? What do you think they could do?
Well, when I grew up here, there was one, count on one finger, that I knew of, and that was in school with me. And I witnessed from a very early age what it looks like to not be in a diverse community, because that one person was picked on ruthlessly, daily, and it was just part of the course. As an empathetic person, I knew that was wrong. Even though growing up at that time, jokes were jokes and diversity didn't exist here. And we're still a very long way off from it. My nephew is transgender and colored, and when he comes to this town for an event, everybody looks at him sideways and he feels uncomfortable. That's heartbreaking. When my own nephew declines to come to an event here in my city because people look at him sideways and clutch their purses, it still goes on. And that is sad, and there is a lot more to be done, but it has to do with education and awareness. So, are we doing enough? No. Are we doing something? Yes. Are we expressing diversity, equity, and inclusion in its entirety? No. We're talking about inclusion, but we're not talking about accessibility. So there's a lot still to be done.
Stephanie, you want to say anything else?
Well, yes, notably, Newburyport is white. It has been since I got here. And it was uncomfortable to have my children, I grew up in the South, to have my children grow up and really never encounter a black person. And that began to change, and I'm glad for it. And I still say that if you want more diversity, you provide more housing opportunities. Thank you.
Anything else, Jenny? Cover it.
I would agree with that. We definitely price people out. There's a lot of classism, a lot of separation in that way, and the affordability of the city has a lot to do with elected diversity. So that's definitely something I would not disagree with at all.
Jenny, would you like to ask your opponent a question? You don't have to.
Sure. I am curious. On a lot of your literature and on your website, you state that you bring a very professional voice that is needed for this position for Ward 2, that we are underrepresented with a professional voice, and it would be very remiss to not be curious exactly what you mean by professional. Is it my lack of formal education or my lack of ability to stenographer a meeting? But either way, there's a pretty heavy conception or perception that you're kind of mistaking my disability for unprofessionalism.
What's the question?
What do you mean by professional?
Okay, well, it's definitely not your disability. But I have been in meetings with you in which you have argued in ways that don't seem conducive to communications with other people. Very, the most memorable probably was when you held a Ward 2 meeting and yelled at a constituent and called her a liar. And then you followed that up actually in an email communications which went to the mayor and every other city council. And I think that kind of discourse has been one of the reasons that maybe Ward 2 is not listened to well by all councilors sometimes in the city council. And it's also very uncomfortable as a member, as a resident, as a citizen to watch things like that happen, and I would not like to see them happen anymore.
Jenny, can you respond to that?
Yes, that one example is very much taken out of context. The one ward meeting I held in hopes of gaining some kind of consensus around the Brown School, which I've been asking for consistently, I was sabotaged with people asking about the cannabis question and why I was bringing that up. And yes, I absolutely did call a person out for lying because I don't take kindly to being accused of doing something underhanded. I don't take kindly to being sabotaged or attacked. So, do I speak from my heart? Yes, I do. Do I defend myself if I am being attacked? Yeah, I'm going to. But to base my entire 2 years of work on one example, I feel is a little disingenuous. And that was a meeting of about 12 or 15 people. So.
Okay, well, I have a newspaper article which actually reports a situation where a fellow city councilor complained about you. So it's not one example, Jenny, and not every example can be reported on or recounted clearly. But there is a sense that the demeanor and temperament is an issue, but it's certainly not your disability.
Anything else, Jenny?
I can't think of any city council meetings when I have ever been anything but the utmost professional. So I'm just not sure really where that actually is coming from other than a few offhanded situations.
Right. So Stephanie, you want to ask your opponent a question?
I would. So about a month ago, Jennie, you did an interview with Ed Carson, Governor's Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And in the interview, the subject did turn to affordability in Newburyport and, you know, what solutions there were for that. And the solution that you brought up and discussed with Mr. Carson was to tax churches. And I wondered if you could expand on that.
Sure. Mr. Carson did invite me on very last minute to have a conversation, and it was very candid. The question was ideally more centered around how do we address the affordability of life in general in this day and age, and affordability of things with the cost of living. So I did answer him candidly with a little cheeky response. I don't regret it. I don't think that mega churches that make billions of dollars in revenue and don't help out the community, you know, that's fair. And I was very clear about not talking about taxing all churches that, you know, exist, but that it's an industry and it's something that the community overlooks. So, not a popular opinion, but certainly not one that was really all that serious either. Interesting to dig that one up, though.
Stephanie, comment on that? You done?
I'm done.
You're done? So let's move on to another cheery subject and talk about the Brown School. So, Stephanie, do you support keeping and renovating the Brown School gym and playground as recreational spaces for Newburyport residents?
I do. I think that we still need that space. Gyms aren't something you tear down. I've talked to many people in Ward 2 who still see a need for them. I've talked to many people who are involved with kids' sports and say we do have a problem where even with the new gym on Low Street, we don't have enough gym space. And Ward 2 doesn't have much community space anymore that is conducive to sports. So it's actually a valuable piece of public property. It really is not going to take that much to get it back into shape so that it can be used. And one of the things, if you're going to move on to the affordable housing at the Brown School.
I did that a little bit already.
Okay, well, because that's one of the arguments about not keeping the gym, is that we should use that space, we should tear it down and put affordable housing in that space. But the problem is that this is a neighborhood. It's a very dense neighborhood. And you need parking for units, and you need, people that have to live there, spend their lives. And so the idea of putting, 40, 64 living units on that piece of land in that building is not good for the neighborhood.
Jenny, should I say the question again? Or?
It got a little convoluted.
Sure.
Exactly what the point was, so yes.
Do you support keeping and renovating the Brown School gym and playground as recreational spaces for Newburyport residents?
In a utopian world, sure. It'd be great to have two gyms. We can't even afford what we're talking about, comfortably with these services. If we're debating spending $8 million on these services, I don't know how $2 million is small change to just operate the gym. It's closer to $6 million to fix the building. But to bare bones the gym back up to operational status for a little under $2 million just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And if we're talking about wanting to have affordable housing at the Brown School for seniors, we really, I don't believe we've been presented with a possibility that we can have both realistically. And also the idea that we would somehow keep the gym and sell or lease the building is sort of not unlike expecting to sell your home and keep the garage and have the homeowner be okay with that. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But as much as we love having a neighborhood gym, I think that 30 affordable senior units is not a stretch, would not impact the neighborhood, and I do think a gym would bring more cars than elderly folks or, folks with mental disabilities. So I'm not married to the gym, I wouldn't die on the hill on it, but if we can keep it, that would be lovely.
Stephanie, your bone?
Well, just again, to point out that the gym is not only a space that we might be able to use for years, but it's still a space that can be used while a youth services center is being built. And that really will be 2 or 3 years. So right now, we have them everywhere in the auditorium at City Hall, at churches. We could have an interim space for youth services and keep a community asset.
Last word, Jenny?
$1.8 million for bare bones renovating the gym at the Brown School. $1.8 million, not $500,000, not small change, and we're arguing about how much to spend on youth services at 59 Willow Street. We can't have everything, so we have to prioritize.
All right, so I have one more question, and then we're going to call it a night. Who do I ask first? Jenny, what is the most important issue facing the city right now?
Well, in an aging city, it's going to be the 3 S's: safety, sidewalks, streets, which pretty much encompasses infrastructure. But when I say safety, that means inclusionary safety, removal of barriers, removal of speedways, traffic calming. A lot of the work I've done on the city council has been on the subcommittees that have a lot to do with the planning of the city. And that has been where I feel I've been the most instrumental, because when we're proactive, it is incredibly much more efficient financially and all around than being retroactive. So having the conversations start with safety, access, inclusion, traffic calming, what's under the road, what is the aging infrastructure. Those are the proactive actions that I think are the most efficient. So for Ward 2, I would say that really, because as a ward councilor, you do think about the ward, and while there's many major citywide issues, the culvert issue, the flooding at Market Square, I foresee to be the next major capital improvement project for Ward 2, and I would support that wholeheartedly if we can get a proper engineering plan put in place, which I do believe they're working on. So that's where I see the importance for the coming term.
Thank you. Same question to you.
Yes, I agree that the culvert project is important, and if you can only pick one thing that's about what's important right now to Newburyport, I think it is the water supply and the sewage system. That infrastructure is getting very old, and taking care of it is going to be very expensive. So the capital improvement plan for the next 5 years for the water department is $57 million. And for the sewer department, it's $12 million, so it doesn't seem as bad. But we really need to take care of our infrastructure. We have a situation now where the state is going to mandate that we take care of our PFAS, forever chemical problem, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So this amount of money doesn't even cover resolving that problem. It doesn't cover resolving, for example, we just got some money to do an inventory of our lead lines. We don't know how many we still have. But once we get that inventory, the state is going to mandate we replace all of them. So we have no idea what that is going to cost.
Jenny, any more comments on that?
Yes, it actually did remind me about the water quality. I don't drink our water. I don't even like showering in it. It drives me crazy. It makes me break out. I can't stand the taste of it. They tell us that it's safe to drink, but there's clearly something wrong with it. And I know that that is a very, not unlike the Streets and Sidewalks project, a massive undertaking that has to be dealt with. We can't let it continue to crumble because we will lose what we have, and we don't have much to begin with. The infrastructure underground that is carrying the water, I mean, beyond the lead, I mean, we still have clay pipes going into people's homes and crumbling and destroying, just getting destroyed by tree roots. That's on the homeowner to fix as well. So there's a lot wrong and a lot to be fixed, and it is going to cost a lot of money. Agreed.
Last word for you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much for being here until 9:15.
So, all right, so that about wraps it up. I want to thank all the candidates for giving it your all. And I want to thank Karen Trowbridge for keeping perfect time over there. Greater Newburyport Community Hub, Media Hub for televising these forums.